You weren't born to please anyone. You were born whole, free, unapologetic. But somewhere between your first breath and your first heartbreak, you were handed a silent contract. A contract that said, be good and they'll love you. Be quiet and they'll keep you. Be agreeable and you'll be safe. You didn't sign it with a pen, you signed it with your silence. That silence became survival. You laughed at jokes that weren't funny. You said yes when everything inside of you screamed no. You shrunk when you should have stood tall. Not because you were weak, but because you learned, like many of us, that approval was currency. And without it, love felt like starvation. But here's the truth they never told you. The more you contort yourself to be liked, the more unrecognizable you become to yourself. People-pleasing is the slowest form of self-abandonment. It's death by 1,000 smiles. And the world rewards it. You get praised for being nice. You're labeled easygoing. They call you selfless. But selfless is just a prettier word for missing. You've made a home in other people's comfort. You've built your identity in their perception. You've mastered the art of disappearing while standing in plain sight. But something inside you is beginning to crack. And that's not weakness. That's a part of you that remembers you were not born for this. There's a psychic fracture that occurs when you live for others. Carl Jung called it the loss of the self, a spiritual amputation. And it shows up in your anxiety, your exhaustion, your quiet resentment, because your soul was not designed to be leased. Every time you say yes to avoid conflict, you plant the seed of bitterness. Every time you pretend to agree just to keep the peace, you declare war on your own voice. And every time you smile through something that is breaking you inside, you are bleeding your authenticity into the ground. But here's the secret. People-pleasing doesn't come from kindness. It comes from fear. The fear of being disliked. The fear of being left. The fear that if you finally show them who you are, they'll walk away. But if someone leaves when you're real, they were never staying for you anyway. You must understand the weight of your own silence. Because in your attempt to be loved, you've become a mirror reflecting back what others want to see. But mirrors don't have souls. They don't feel, they don't choose, they don't live. And neither do you when you let everyone else define your shape. The irony is cruel. The more you try to be accepted by everyone, the less you are known by anyone, especially yourself. And so you begin to wear masks, one for family, one for friends, one for work, one for strangers. But the most dangerous part of wearing a mask is forgetting it's not your face. One day, you look in the mirror and realize you've become everyone but yourself. This is the moment you must return, not to who they told you to be, but to who you were before the world taught you to beg for love. Reclaim your no. It is not cruelty. It is clarity. Reclaim your boundaries. They are not walls, they are doors. Reclaim your truth. Because the truth doesn't need to scream. It just needs to be said. You don't owe the world a performance. You don't have to twist yourself into shapes that make others more comfortable. Let them be uncomfortable. Let them misunderstand. Let them go. You cannot be free if you're still handcuffed to other people's expectations. And here's what they won't tell you. The version of you they loved, the agreeable one, the quiet one, the easy one, that was never you. That was the mask. And when you remove it, some people believe. Let them. That's not rejection, that's revelation. You are not here to be palatable. You are not here to be digestible. You are not here to be everyone's favorite flavor. You are here to be real. And real doesn't always taste sweet. Sometimes real tastes like boundaries, like silence, like walking away, like being alone long enough to remember your own voice. Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But to claim that privilege, you must disappoint a few people. You must break a few unspoken contracts. You must risk being seen in your raw, untamed form, because the world has enough copies. It needs more truth, the truth of you, unmasked, unedited, untamed. Not the you they taught you to be, not the you that's easy to love, but the you that you've buried beneath the people you were afraid to lose. That self is still alive, is still waiting, still burning with a quiet fire. And every time you choose yourself, that fire grows brighter. You are not selfish for wanting to breathe. You are not wrong for needing space. You are not broken for saying, I don't want this anymore. You are finally remembering what wholeness feels like. So stop apologizing for your no. Stop shrinking so others can feel tall. Stop editing yourself just to fit inside someone else's story. This is your life. And your soul is not up for negotiation. Let them call you difficult. Let them say you've changed. Let them leave. But never again let them decide who you are. Because here's the hidden cost. No one speaks about it. Every time you abandon yourself to be accepted, you reinforce the belief that your truth is not worth standing up for. And beliefs, when repeated enough, become reality. You teach your nervous system that peace is dangerous, that love must be earned by erasure, that safety comes only after sacrifice. Sacrifice of your wants, your voice, your presence. This is not love. This is emotional slavery dressed as belonging. And slavery of any kind, especially the kind you volunteer for, always ends in suffering. The world has conditioned you to betray yourself nicely, to be agreeable, to be professional, to be polite. But politeness without principle is a prison. You are not here to be polite while your soul withers. You are here to be sovereign. And sovereignty starts when you remember you don't exist to manage other people's comfort. You don't exist to be a cushion for someone else's fragility. You don't exist to entertain, explain, or absorb their projections. You exist to live your truth fully, fiercely, and without apology. Most people fear confrontation, not because they hate conflict, but because they were never taught how to hold their own without guilt. So instead of facing the discomfort of truth, they learn to fold, to bend, to bow. But every time you choose comfort over courage, you cut yourself away from your destiny, because you cannot rise while kneeling at the altar of other people's expectations. True power begins the moment you stop negotiating your worth. Look closely at the places you feel most exhausted. They will tell you where you're overgiving. They will tell you who you're performing for. They will reveal who benefits from your silence. And make no mistake, someone always benefits from your self-abandonment. But it's never you. So stop waiting for permission to be real. Stop asking for approval to speak your truth. No one will hand you your freedom. You must take it. This isn't rebellion. This is restoration. Restoring the truth of who you were before you learned to be convenient. And it will be hard, because when you stop being who they want you to be, you'll face the silence, the disapproval, the cold shoulders, the subtle punishments. That's the price of authenticity. But it's also the doorway to liberation, because once you survive being misunderstood, once you survive being alone with your truth, you'll realize you never needed them to choose you. You only ever needed to choose yourself. You knew that individuation, becoming your fullest, truest self, always involves the shattering of illusions. It's the death of the false self. The ego, the mask. It's painful, but that pain is sacred. It means you're finally shedding the skin that never fit. You are not here to fit. You are here to expand. And the ones who truly see you will not flinch when you finally show up as you. They will not punish your wholeness. They will honor it. But first, you must walk through the fire of your own becoming. Not everyone will make the journey with you. Let them go. Some people were only meant to love the mask. This is your life's turning point. Right here. Right now. Not some future day when you feel ready. Not after you read one more book or heal one more wound. Now, choose yourself now, even if your voice trembles, even if they call you selfish, even if it means starting over, because starting over as your true self is better than succeeding as someone you're not. You were not made to be manageable. You were made to be magnificent. So stop shrinking. Stand. Stand in your truth. Stand in your no. Stand in your boundaries. Stand in your enoughness. And let them call it whatever they want. Because from this moment forward, you are no longer available for your own destruction. You are no longer available for self-negotiation. No longer available for diluted dreams. No longer available for emotional bartering where your peace is traded for proximity. You've tasted the bitterness of pleasing everyone. Now it's time to drink the fire of your own freedom. Let them say you've changed. Let them call you difficult, distant, even delusional. That is the language of people who only knew the version of you that kept bleeding to keep them comfortable. Let them say it, and let it echo behind you as you walk away. Because walking away isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's evolution. You are not hard to love. You are just no longer easy to use. And that shift, that sacred reclamation of your soul will terrify those who fed off your compliance. But don't mistake their fear for your failure. It's proof you've stopped betraying yourself. We live in a culture addicted to politeness over truth, compliance over clarity, a culture that worships likability, even if it costs your aliveness. But likability is a leash, and you were never meant to live on your knees. You were meant to rise, to roar, to reclaim. And if that rising makes others uncomfortable, so be it. Comfort was never the goal, liberation was. Carl Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And he was right. Because when you accept yourself, you shatter the illusion that you ever needed to be fixed, edited, or explained. You realize the cage was never real. It was built from borrowed beliefs. Beliefs that told you, don't be too loud. Don't take up too much space. Don't want too much. Don't ask. Don't choose yourself. But you're done with that script. You're not here to be a chapter in someone else's comfort story. You're here to write a new book, one where your voice is not just heard, but honored. So stop being afraid of who you really are. Stop tiptoeing around your own power. Stop apologizing for your presence. This world needs your truth more than it needs your compliance. Yes, some will recoil. Some will walk away. Some will call you selfish, arrogant, or crazy. Let them. Their discomfort is not your burden. You are not responsible for the stories they tell themselves to feel safe in your absence. You are only responsible for one thing now, to no longer disappear inside of yourself. Because disappearing is no longer survival, it's suffocation. And you have too much light left to give to die buried in other people's comfort. The next time you feel the urge to please, pause. Ask yourself, is this kindness or is this self-erasure? Is this generosity or is this fear wearing a smile? Am I helping or am I hiding? Am I loving them or am I abandoning me? These questions are your compass, and the answers will liberate you. You don't need to be loved by everyone. You just need to be loved by yourself completely, deeply, relentlessly. Because When you love yourself enough to disappoint others, you finally stop disappointing you. And that's when the shift happens. That's when your voice deepens. That's when your spine straightens. That's when your presence becomes unshakable. Not because you've become aggressive, but because you've become whole. Because you've realized you are not here to be invited. You are not here to be chosen. You are here to belong to yourself. And when you belong to yourself, the world no longer gets to vote on your worth. You become untouchable. So stand in the ashes of the version of you that lived for their approval. Let it burn. Let it collapse. Let it die. Because something greater is waiting to rise from within you. Something unshakable. Something ancient. Something sacred. Your true self. The one who never needed to be pleasing. Only present. The one who never needed to be easy. Only real. And when you become real, truly, fiercely, unapologetically real, you become free. Forever. And freedom, true freedom, isn't loud. It doesn't seek validation. It doesn't ask for applause. It doesn't come wrapped in gold or glory. True freedom is quiet. It lives in the moment you say no without guilt. It lives in the hour you rest without permission. It lives in the breath you take without explaining why you need space. It lives in the sacred moment when you no longer ask, will they still love me if I stop pleasing them? And instead you ask, will I still love myself if I don't? Because love without truth is bondage. And truth without love is brutality. But love with truth, that is freedom, that is peace, that is power. And you are stepping into a power most never touch in their lifetime. Because you are no longer driven by fear. You are led by integrity. The integrity to show up as you are, to speak without trembling, to live without explanation. And there is nothing more unstoppable than a person who has made peace with their own presence. This is what happens when you stop pleasing. You stop chasing breadcrumbs and start building a feast. You stop begging to be chosen and realize you are the chooser. You stop molding yourself to fit rooms too small for your soul. And instead, you become the room. You become the presence. You become the gravity that pulls authenticity from everyone around you. Because realness is contagious. And when you stop performing, you give others the courage to do the same. That is how healing spreads. Not through speeches or slogans, but through one person who dares to live fully aligned. One person who dares to say, I will no longer abandon myself, not for love, not for peace, not for anything. That person changes everything. So now the question is, will that person be you? Will you choose a lonely path that leads to freedom, or the crowded path that leads to quiet suffering? Will you walk away from comfort so you can finally sit at the table of your own truth? Because at that table, there is no mask. There is no performance. There is no pretending. There is only the unfiltered, unedited, unbreakable you. And I promise you this, the moment you sit down, the moment you stop folding, shrinking, sacrificing, you will feel the ground beneath you shift. The air will taste different. The silence will feel holy. And your soul will whisper, finally, you came back. Because this isn't just about stopping the habit of pleasing. It's about reclaiming your place in the universe. It's about remembering that your voice was never meant to be small. Your needs were never too much. Your dreams were never a burden. And your truth, it was always worthy of being heard, held, honored. You just forgot. But now, you remember. Now you rise. Now you return to the fire, to the depths, to the you that was buried beneath years of smiles that weren't yours. You dig, you break, you bleed, you breathe, and in the wreckage of your people-pleasing past, you build. You build a self no one can take from you. Not with words, not with silence, not with love withheld or approval denied. You are done begging. You are done bending. You are done disappearing. From this moment forward, you walk not for their love, but for your life. And every step you take is a declaration. I am done pleasing. I am here to be free. You can be deeply loved and still feel profoundly alone. You can be surrounded by affection, laughter, and warm bodies, and still ache with a kind of emptiness that no one sees, not even you. Because this emptiness doesn't come from the absence of others. It comes from the absence of you, the you abandoned to be chosen, the you silenced to be agreeable, the you edited to be accepted. What most people call love is often just a transaction, an unspoken deal. I'll give you the version of me you want if you give me the illusion that I matter. But illusions are hollow, and that hollowness doesn't go away, it deepens. You wake up one day and realize you've built a relationship on performance, and it's killing you. You ask yourself, why am I still not fulfilled? Because fulfillment doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being known, not your curated mask, not your filtered personality, but the raw, flawed, brilliant truth of who you are beneath the armor. And that's what you've been hiding, not because you're weak, but because you were taught that your truth is too much. Your needs are too needy. Your wounds are inconvenient. Your darkness is dangerous. But here's what they never told you. Your darkness is not the enemy. It is the passage. Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. You think your relationships are failing because of the other person. But more often, they're failing because you never brought your full self into them. You brought your conditioning. You brought your fear. You brought the version of love you learned, not the one you needed. So, of course, it feels empty. You can't drink from a cup that was never meant to hold truth. You can't find intimacy where you are not whole. And you cannot be truly seen if you have not yet seen yourself. The psyche, as Jung understood it, is not simple. It is layered, shadowed, fragmented. And if you do not journey into those inner layers, you will keep projecting your unmet needs onto people who were never meant to carry them. You will keep expecting others to save you from your own void, to make you feel chosen when you haven't chosen yourself, to heal what you won't name, to stay when you constantly leave parts of yourself behind. And it will never work, because no one can fill the emptiness that self-abandonment creates. They can distract you from it. They can soothe it for a while. They can even convince you it's gone. But when the noise fades and the mask slips, there it is again, that ache, that echo, that gnawing question. Why do I still feel unseen even when someone says they love me? Because you can only be loved to the depth you're willing to reveal. You can only be met to the degree you've met yourself. And you can only feel full in a relationship when you are not starving for your own presence. So the question is not, why are they not enough? The real question is, where did I lose myself? When did I start believing that I had to be less to be loved more? When did I decide that my truth was a liability instead of a foundation? You see, relationships are mirrors. And what they reflect most clearly is not your partner. It's your own fractures. The way you flinch when someone gets close not because they're untrustworthy, but because you have forgotten how to trust your own instincts. The way you apologize for existing too loudly, not because you're wrong, but because you learned that your power threatened people who preferred you small. The way you sabotage love the moment it feels safe, not because safety is bad, but because it's foreign. And unfamiliar comfort often feels like danger to a nervous system addicted to chaos. These aren't flaws. They're patterns, unconscious ones. And they run your life until you drag them into the light. You will always feel empty in relationships until you understand this. Love cannot save you from yourself. It can hold you, challenge you, reflect you, but it cannot replace the sacred work of reuniting with the parts of you you disown just to survive. And it's not your fault. We live in a world that teaches performance over presence, persona over authenticity, validation over truth. But Jung didn't believe healing was about perfection. He believed it was about integration, bringing all of who you are, light and shadow, into consciousness. Only then can you love from wholeness. Only then can someone actually see you and stay. So how do you begin? You stop running. You stop running from your aloneness, and you sit with it. Not as a punishment, but as a teacher. Because the loneliness you feel inside the wrong relationship is the part of you calling for reunion with yourself. You listen, not to the noise of dating advice, social media dopamine, or self-help hacks that bypass the soul, but to the quiet whisper underneath all of it. I want to come home to myself. You make space for your shadow. You let the anger speak. You let the grief rise. You stop numbing the ache with other people's bodies. And you start asking, what am I really afraid of? Most people say they fear abandonment. But the real fear is intimacy. Because true intimacy requires exposure, vulnerability, courage, not the kind of courage that chases love, the kind that stops chasing, that stands still long enough to ask, what does it mean to be with someone without losing myself? And that's where the work begins. That's where the work begins. Because until you understand the difference between connection and codependency, you will confuse attention for affection, control for care, and obsession for devotion. And that confusion, it costs you everything. You begin to orbit around others like they are the sun, forgetting that you were born a star yourself. You dim just to make them shine. You shrink just to make them stay. You betray your boundaries, hoping they'll reward your loyalty with love. But love that demands your silence is not love. It is a cage with velvet walls soft enough to seduce, but strong enough to contain. Jung called it the persona, the mask we wear to survive society. But what happens when the mask starts wearing you? What happens when the image you've projected becomes more real than the self you've abandoned? You lose your ability to be touched, because touch without truth feels like invasion. And intimacy without authenticity becomes suffocating. You wonder why your relationships feel distant, even when you are physically close. Because closeness is not measured in inches, it is measured in depth. And if you haven't descended into your own depths, how can you possibly hold someone else in theirs? We fear being too much. But the truth is, no one has ever been too much for the right person. You have only been too much for those committed to staying shallow. For those who were never taught how to swim in emotional oceans, only to float on surface pleasantries. And maybe you've done the same. So now it's time. Time to stop mourning relationships that were never rooted in reality. Time to stop begging for love from people who only knew how to love your performance, never your presence. You want to feel full? Then be brave enough to feel empty first. Because in the silence of your own soul, you will meet the parts of you that don't need fixing, only witnessing. You don't need someone to complete you. You need to reclaim the fragments you gave away, the fragments you scattered in past relationships, the pieces of self-respect you traded for validation, the boundaries you bulldozed just to be touched, the integrity you bartered just to belong. You are not a half. You are not an echo. You are not a question mark waiting to be answered by another person's love. You are the whole damn exclamation. But only if you remember. Because no relationship can hold what you refuse to own. If you hide your needs, they will starve. If you suppress your voice, it will shatter your peace from the inside out. If you dim your light, you will attract people who fear the fire, not those who dance in it. Carl Jung warned us, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And isn't that what we do in love? We fall for the fantasy instead of facing ourselves. We look for rescue instead of reflection. We chase happily ever after instead of asking, am I even living honestly right now? If you want relationships that nourish, not drain you, you must begin where most are too afraid to look. In the mirror. Not the kind that flatters, but the kind that reveals. Not the kind that edits, but the kind that exposes. You don't attract what you deserve. You attract what you are. And if you are still fragmented, still ruled by unresolved pain, you will be drawn to people who mirror your brokenness, not your brilliance. But here's the miracle. That same mirror can become your medicine. The relationship that cracked you open, it wasn't a failure. It was a revelation. It showed you the places that still bleed, the stories that still haunt, the boundaries you never built, the voice you never used. Pain is not punishment. It is the soul's most honest feedback. It says, something here is not aligned with your truth. So listen. Stop silencing the ache. Stop medicating the emptiness with distractions dressed as love. Sit with it. Because when you stop running from your loneliness, it transforms. It stops being a void and becomes a gateway. A gateway to knowing yourself, not through others, but through presence. A gateway to choosing yourself, not because someone else didn't, but because you finally did. And when you do, when you come home to your wholeness, you stop needing people to fill you. You start inviting people who can meet you. Not save you, not fix you, not complete you. Just witness you in your fullness, in your depth, in your darkness, and in your dawn. This is not poetic theory. This is psychological truth. Jungian psychology teaches that wholeness does not come from rejecting the shadow, it comes from integrating it. And until you integrate your shadow, you will project it onto lovers, onto friends, onto anyone who comes close enough to trigger what you have not healed. So how do you break the cycle? You stop assigning others the role of healer. You stop expecting your partner to fix what your childhood fractured. You stop blaming them for your emptiness and start befriending it. Because your emptiness is not a flaw. It's an invitation to excavate the parts of you buried under years of performance, to unearth the child who learned that love must be earned, to rescue the adolescent who decided their needs were a burden, to hold the adult who still fears that real connection is always followed by loss. No one teaches us how to stay when it's hard, how to stay when we're triggered, how to stay when the other person holds a mirror to the wounds we've spent years avoiding. But the work of love, real love, is not in the falling. It's in the staying. Staying with yourself first, and then learning how to stay with another without disappearing. That's what your soul is craving. Not just romance, not just chemistry, but depth, sanctuary, the kind of connection where masks fall and truth rises, where silence isn't avoidance, but reverence, where your presence alone is proof that you no longer abandon yourself to be held. You are not too much. You were just never in the right room. And now it's time to build that room inside of you. A place where every part of your psyche has a seat at the table. The shadow, the child, the warrior, the seeker, the truth teller, the one who finally said, enough, enough, enough with pretending you're fine just because someone stayed. Enough with calling it love when what you're actually doing is emotionally negotiating your right to exist. Enough with smiling through soul-numbing silence just to avoid confrontation. You were not born to be tolerated. You were born to be known, not just touched, not just praised, known. And to be known, you have to know yourself first. Not your resume, not your relationship history, not your achievements, but your truth, the beliefs you've swallowed without question, the needs you've buried out of shame, the desires you're afraid to name, the wounds you've disguised as strength. This is where transformation begins, in ruthless inner honesty, not the feel-good bubble bath kind of self-love, but the gritty, tear-stained kind, the kind that forces you to ask, who have I been becoming in order to be loved? And who would I become if I stopped? If you never asked yourself that you've been sleepwalking, moving through relationships like a ghost, looking for a body to haunt, and the tragedy is you keep calling it love. Jung warned us, when the shadow is not integrated, it sabotages. It becomes the hand behind your decisions, the force that keeps you replaying the same story with different names. You keep attracting emotionally unavailable people. It's not because the world is cruel. It's because you are emotionally unavailable to yourself. You keep losing yourself in relationships. It's not because they were too powerful. It's because you surrendered your power before the first kiss. Let's get brutally honest. You can't keep blaming others for patterns you participate in. Healing doesn't begin with being understood. Healing begins when you stop abandoning the parts of yourself you think are unlovable. Do you want to know why it feels so hollow after they leave, or worse, while they stay? Because you handed over your identity like a gift, wrapped in silence, sealed with compliance, and now you're grieving something that was never rooted in truth. You're not heartbroken over the person. You're mourning the parts of yourself you lost while trying to be what they needed. But here's the hidden doorway. That grief, that hollowness is not a curse. It is the compass. It's showing you where you were never free. It's pointing to the boundary you never drew. It's revealing the lie you lived and the truth you're ready to walk into. It hurts because you're finally awake. And waking up is violent at first, like being ripped from the comfort of delusion into the cold clarity of what actually is. But clarity is power, because when you see clearly, you choose consciously. You stop defaulting to survival. You start living in alignment. You stop being magnetized to chaos. You start creating peace that doesn't depend on performance. You stop over-explaining your worth. You start embodying it wordless, grounded, undeniable. This is individuation. The sacred path. Jung mapped out the journey from fragmentation to integration. And it is not a linear walk through light. It is a spiral through shadow. You will lose who you thought you were. You will confront parts of you you swore you buried. You will question the meaning of love, of self, of connection. But one day, without even realizing it, you will sit across from someone who sees you without flinching, who doesn't need you to shrink or shine or shapeshift, because you no longer need that either. And in that moment, you'll feel it. The difference, the shift, the solidity of your own presence. You realize, I am not empty. I was just echoing back the hollowness of who I pretended to be. Now, you speak from substance. Now, your love is not a plea, it is a gift. Now, your boundaries are not walls, they are gateways. Now, your stillness is not silence, it is sovereignty. But this doesn't happen by accident. It happens the moment you say, I will no longer betray myself to be loved. I will no longer call abandonment intimacy. I will no longer romanticize emotional starvation. Because love, true love, starts within. And until you meet yourself at the depths where no one applauds, you will keep begging for what you have the power to give yourself. You are not waiting for someone to choose you. You are remembering that you've always been the one with the key, the one with the voice, the one with the fire, the one who doesn't need to be understood by the world because they finally understand themselves. And from that place, you become magnetic, not to everyone, but to the right ones, the ones who resonate with truth, the ones who are not afraid of your intensity, the ones who meet your depth, not with fear, but with reverence, because you stopped begging for crumbs and started building a feast. You started building a feast, not for others to validate your worth, but for your soul to remember it. Every choice you make now echoes with the sound of someone who has come home, to their body, to their truth, to their voice. You no longer beg to be chosen, because you've chosen yourself in the most sacred way possible, not as a trend, not as a performance, but as a rebirth. And in that rebirth, something remarkable happens. Your emptiness no longer haunts you, because you understand it now. It wasn't emptiness, it was space. Space you never gave yourself permission to occupy. And now you occupy it fully. Not with noise, not with desperation, but with presence. You show up. You speak clearly. You don't overstay where you are not seen. You no longer confuse chemistry with connection or control with care. You no longer fall in love with potential, you fall in love with alignment. You don't chase. You attract, not because you manipulate, but because you radiate what you are. Whole, unapologetic, awake. Let others call you too much. Let them say you've changed. Let them walk away from the truth they're not ready to face. Because you are not here to perform your worth. You are here to embody it. This is the root of all secure, sacred connection. When two whole beings meet not to complete each other, but to witness one another. No masks, no games, no seduction through sacrifice. Only presence, only truth, only depth. But to receive that, you must first become it. You must become the safe space you've begged others to create. You must become the love you once made conditional. You must become the fierce protector of your own inner sanctuary. A place where your pain is not denied, but honored, where your story is not erased, but rewritten by you. You'll notice something beautiful once you do this. You no longer attract people who test your worth. You attract those who reflect it. You no longer fear being alone. You revel in your solitude, because your solitude is no longer a prison. It is proof that you'd rather be whole and walking alone than fragmented and surrounded by the wrong kind of closeness. So, stop apologizing for your clarity. Stop minimizing your standards just to be understood. You're not difficult. You're just finally difficult to manipulate. You're not cold. You've just stopped melting for people who only came to burn you. You're not bitter. You're just deeply aware of what you will no longer tolerate in the name of love. This is the soul's emancipation. This is how you break the ancestral chain of self-abandonment. Not through rage, but through rootedness. Not through rebellion, but through remembering. Remember this. You are not a lover who was too hard to love. You were a mirror that made them see themselves. You were a storm sent to test the strength of their walls. You were a home they weren't ready to enter. But now finally you've entered your own. Room by room, you've swept the shame out of the corners. You've unlocked doors you once swore would stay shut. You've let the light in. Not someone else's spotlight. Your own. And with every step you take in this house, you've rebuilt in this inner kingdom of truth. You become the kind of person who doesn't just love. You liberate. Because your presence gives others permission to stop pretending to take off the mask, to bring their shadow into the light, to speak the truth they thought would make them unlovable, only to discover this is where love actually begins. And in the end, that's all any of us want. Not the fantasy, not the illusion, but the real, a love that doesn't require you to vanish to be seen. A love that isn't a performance, but a powerful co-creation. But you can't find that until you become it. You can't become it until you return to yourself. And you can't return until you stop running. So let this be the moment you stop. Right here. Right now. Let this be the moment you sit in the silence and hear it. You were never empty. You were just waiting for yourself to arrive. And now you have.